All right. How are you guys feeling, Spooky? Are you guys ready to get this panel underway? All right. It is my absolute privilege to bring to the stage at this time. He's the one. He's the only. Clint. All right. You have your pick. Do you want the throne, couch, whatever you feel?
I don't know.
You have to.
Okay, I'll sit in the frame throne.
Oh, man.
Well, hello, everybody.
How's your weekend been so far?
Oh, it's been wonderful. The fans here in Orlando, and then no BS. It's just wave after wave of, really genuine people, and it really humbles me that my work over the years has garnered sort of that sort of respect. So thank you guys very much. Thank you.
And I have to say, I must commend you on your hat. First of all, I love it, Ice Cream Man, but also it's perfect for kind of keeping the sun out in Florida, right? I mean, stylish.
Well, it's also it keeps this thing from getting sunburned.
Yeah, there you go. There's protective and cool. So how often do people come up to ask you what your favorite flavor of ice cream is?
Oh, often. Listen up. What mostly happens is from across the street, somebody yells, "Hey, it's the ice cream man!" When you get drawn into conversation, I don't know, some people can't help themselves when they mention Butterbribble. I get it from time to time.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I have to say, you have such a vast majority of work. You've been described as a chameleon of sorts, and that has to be such a big, big compliment. So what does that mean to you, to be described as an acting chameleon?
Well, am I blending in with this chair? I don't know, an acting chameleon. Listen, I just try to do a good job. I make every effort, every day of employment, to give it my best, and that was delivered to me by my mom and dad. My dad especially. I mean, both my mom and dad are gone, but my dad, he was the one that was the one with us on the set. He was the one that really guided us. He was like a child actor whisperer. And so he instilled not show business tricks. There's no trick to show business. You work hard, you listen, you pay attention, be prepared. I think one advantage I had as a child is I started so young, the lessons were very fundamental, and very simple. And those lessons have not changed over the years. I was very fortunate to be successful early on, and I just have kept repeating it. And what I learned, my acting knowledge is to relax, get into the moment, bring myself into that character, and listen. Really listen. Now that doesn't mean in every moment of my acting career I've always listened. But it's one of those things, it's a fallback thing. Am I struggling with a character? Am I struggling with a moment? Am I fumbling with dialogue? Well, it's funny how if you just stop, slow down, and listen, things start to fall into place. And that is a tool that I learned from way before I remember. Because I started acting when I was 2 years old. So I don't have any memories. I don't really have any pure memories of me working as an actor until I was about 5 or 6. So these are all things that I just learned by osmosis. And also another thing for just the acting geeks out there, everybody in life is motivated by something at every moment. There's always a reason. And as a child, it was simply, well, Clint, why are you going into the scene? Why are you saying this? Are you trying to get something from your parents? What is your intention with the scene? So kind of always understanding what the motive of my behavior is at the time is always a great trigger for me to get into that moment and be honest.
course, are one of the few actors that have gotten to be part of Star Trek and Star Wars. So can you tell us a little bit about, a galaxy far, far away, and also Space: The Final Frontier?
Well, as far as a galaxy far, far away, I found out that Ron was going to replace these directors and direct solo, and I was excited for him. And Ron and I have a wonderful, close relationship. But my goodness, Ron was stepping into a position where they had already been filming for like 70 some odd days. So in my mind, I thought, well, the cloth is cut here. The actors have all been hired. There's going to be nothing for me to do. And then Ron gave me a call, and it's always a lovely phone call to get from my brother. And he goes, I think there might be something in this one for me. And he actually told me later, he didn't even suggest it. It was Kathleen Kennedy is the one that when they were having their initial meetings, there was a sequence that they were going to have to redo, which meant they were going to have to recast this role. And Kathleen Kennedy said, well, this might be a really good spot for your brother. And Ron was, of course, tickled that he didn't have to, well, he doesn't. Ron does not strong-arm me into his films. It's only if I can fit. Listen, I consider Ron, first of all, he's a great older brother. So he's an awesome older brother. He's a Hall of Fame film director. But he's the director. And I am just an Indian working, And if he can find a spot for me, I certainly will do it. Well, this character, Ralakili, came up, and as he described it to me over the phone from London, it was something I go, yeah, I can play that guy. I think originally, as it was described, I was Mickey from Rocky. The grizzled old trainer, except instead of training a fighter, I was training a robot. And that's how Ron pitched me the idea. And I said, sure, bud, I can do it. I certainly want to jump on an airplane and go be in Star Wars. And just a little side note here, I auditioned for Luke Skywalker back in about 1975. Wow. Yes, in fact, I remember really vividly. We were auditioning. It was a big open audition. They were seeing dozens and dozens of actors that day. They were probably seeing hundreds of actors over the course of a few weeks to see. It was like an open call. And it was at 20th Century Fox Studios, and we were waiting outside, and I remember seeing Mark Hamill. Mark Hamill was like going to be coming in a little bit later. And I had been given the sides. Now this is long before there was any videotape, anything digital. There were no, what do they call it? You do it from home. The auditions, you do it from home. So everybody went in and read, and I got the sides, and I'm going to play this character, Luke Skywalker. And I went into the room. I saw Francis Coppola in the room. Now, Francis had already done The Godfathers. It's like, Jesus, Francis is in the room, And now Ron had already been in American Graffiti, so I knew that they knew me. But there was Francis Coppola was in the room. There was a veteran film producer, Fred Bruce, was in the room. There was another guy, Gino Havens, in the room. And I didn't see George. George was in a big leather chair about this big, and it was the back. He was turned away from me. And as I walked into the room and got ready to stand in front of the desk, George Lucas swung his chair around, and I saw him, and he looked at me, and he went, "Commander Baylock, the Corbinite maneuver." And in my mind, I said, "George, get a friggin' life." See, you gotta understand, I did my Star Trek appearance, my first Star Trek appearance, when I was about 6 years old. And I considered myself a baby. I was a baby. And here I was competing for a major role as an adult. And the last thing I wanted the director to do was look at me and say, "I remember you when you were a baby." That's why I said, "Get a friggin' life." I didn't say it. I thought it. Now, as it turns out, George had a pretty good life. But that was, and that was way before Star Trek was ever being syndicated. George George got his inspiration from science fiction from Star Trek. And hence, I did my first episode of Star Trek. It aired the season in 1966. And I presently have 1, 2, 3, 4. I have 4 versions of Star Trek television shows that have been aired. And I can't say anything, but they're doing a season of a show called Strange New Worlds. Yeah, and you know, they're going to do. I think it's an episode. They're starting out with doing 10 episodes a season, and it's pretty exciting. And all I can say is stay tuned, folks. And wait, now one thing about the world of Star Trek. I did it when I was a child, right? And Corbomite maneuver, fun, great experience. And then when they started doing the television series, we got word, when I say we, it was myself and my agent, got word that they were not seeing anybody that had been on the original, Star Trek, the original show. They weren't seeing anybody for Next Generation. And they weren't seeing anybody for Deep Space Nine that had been on Star Trek. So it was like, okay, I would like to be on the show, but if they have a policy of not having any actors like, that have been on previously, I understand. Well, my agent called me, and this was during Deep Space Nine, called me and said, listen, Dave, I got you an audition for Deep Space Nine. And I said to him, I go, well, I don't think they're going to hire me because they have a policy of not hiring any old actors. They've probably forgotten about that. So I auditioned and got the role. I played a character named Brady, and it was called Past Tense. It was on Deep Space Nine, and I did that, and then I did Enterprise, and then I did Discovery. So far, there it is.
And I know you were recently reunited with William Shatner.
Yes, I ran into Bill Shatner at GalaxyCon, and what a wonderful experience that was, because I hadn't seen him in a long time. Now, I had seen him since we had done the Star Trek, the episode, The Corbomite Maneuver, because there was one time, and I must have been about 40 years old, he had written a series of science fiction books, and he was doing one. He was going to direct a TV movie of one of his science fiction books. And I auditioned for the role. And I got a chance to go in and see him and audition in front of William Shatner. And he didn't hire me. And I hold no grudges. I laugh about when I think to myself, he didn't hire me. But no, listen, directors have to make decisions, and they decided not to hire me. But then I was able to, it was just a few months ago. I saw him, and we had a really nice chat back in the green room, and he's getting up there in years, but he remembered, and we had a fun little chat, and he's a very lovable guy. If you guys ever have a chance to meet him, what an icon. My goodness, William Shatner. He was in Twilight Zone for crying out loud. He saw the dude out on the airplane, out on the wing. So anyway, yeah, that was...
He's been to space.
Yes, he has been to space, yes. And he's been on a horse. Actually, here's one thing. This is news that's long since passed. No one's going to care. No one's going to get in trouble. I have 2 artificial hips, and so does Bill's got one. And in fact, when I had my artificial hip done, my first one done, my surgeon, and I'm not going to get him in trouble because he could get in trouble for this. He said to me, he goes, your co-star just had his done 10 days ago, and he's already been on a horse. Oh my God. And then, you know what, Bill Shatner, he's a Canadian, and he grew up on a farm, a horseman, a ranch. And one tough SOB, here he was 80 years old, he just had his hip replaced. And the day that they released him for physical activity, his choice was to go to his horse and get on it. Tough son of a bitch. I got on a horse. I I needed a step stool. But coming up this summer, I'm in a movie called The Old Way, which is a Western that Nick Cage is the star, and Ryan Kiera Armstrong is the co-star. She's wonderful. She was in American Horror Story, the past season of American Horror Story. And she played the lead in Firestarter also. But anyway, this is Nick Cage's first Western that he ever shot. And we filmed it up in Montana, and it was a wonderful opportunity to go up there and work with Nick and work on a film. My wife, Kat, and my daughter, Rafa, came up and we hung out for 5 or 6 weeks working on this movie, and I did. I got up on a horse, I rode around, I did some of my own stunts, and it was a wonderful experience. And it's a good movie. And if you get a chance to see it, coming up later on this summer, it's called The Old Way. And Nick Cage is very dynamic in this movie, and I think it'll be a popular picture.
Awesome. We can't wait to see it. That's awesome. Thank you. All right, so we do have a microphone set up right in the middle of the room. Whatever questions you guys may have, now is your time to ask. All right, you're up first. What's your name?
Stephen. Besides your brother, your niece has become quite a prolific director these days too.
Yeah.
I'm just wondering, so far, what do you think of her work? And she hasn't given us anything on Uncle Clint. I think I have something I want to direct you with.
Well, that's already happened.
It has.
Thank you. Yes. Well, not on Mandalorian yet. But one of the first things she ever directed was part of a Lifetime Channel series, and it was called Call Me Crazy. And actually, it was it wasn't a series. It was a movie that they broke it up, and they had like 4 or 5 different stories, like an anthology, about the human condition. And they were all directed by women. It was a women-driven, women-centric kind of production. And Bryce got to direct one of the episodes. And in fact, her episode was called Call Me Crazy. And she did call me. She said, Uncle Clint, I'd love you to come down. It's not much of a part, but you got to come down and be in my movie. And I was, Bryce, I would love to. And both me and her mother, Cheryl, came down, and it was sort of the premise of the part of the movie that we were in was it was an insane asylum, and it was a little like One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. It was group therapy for wackos. Which I can see why I got hired for that. I don't know about Cheryl. But anyway, watching Bryce direct brought tears to my eyes, because her mannerisms so much mimicked her dad. The way she would approach actors, the way she would bounce from Video Village to the set to give an actor a final note, to the way she would interact with the crew, it reminded me so much of Ron. And in fact, after I worked a couple of days on the show, and the first day, I came home and I had to call Ron. I said, Bud, first of all, you got to be really, really proud of your daughter, because she's just fine. She holds the reins as good as anybody, and you should be so proud, because she has all of your best qualities and all of her mother's best qualities. Cheryl, Ron's wife, they've been married almost 50 years now. That Bryce has, as my dad would say, taken the bid. She's charged forward as a director, and she's wonderful. But I'll give you one little story. She does. Seriously, she had the same mannerisms as Ron, the way she would kind of go up to people and talk to them and stuff, and whisper in their ear. Except, and I told this to Ron, I said, there's one thing that your daughter does that you shouldn't do, because you're going to get in trouble if you do it. And that is, as she's talking to an actor, she will play with their hair. Like, she'd do it with me, obviously. She'd play with. But she would, as she would lean in to give an actor a little note, private moment, why don't you think about this, or why don't you slow down a little bit here? This is kind of a conversation that a director has with an actor that they don't necessarily want to publish. You don't want to advertise this. Just a simple note, But then Cheryl or Bryce would lean in and immediately start twirling their hair. And Ron, and I told Ron, I go, if you do that, people will think you're weird. And Ron laughed and he goes, well, you know what that's from? She's the oldest sibling. Bryce has been twirling people's hair since she had her first sister. It's something that Bryce does, and we all get a laugh at that. But I'll tell you, again, about Bryce, she's a great person. She means what she says. She does not talk out of both sides of her mouth. She has the wonderful combination of Ron's sensibilities and her mom, Cheryl's passion. And I wish her all the best. Of course I wish her the best, because eventually she's going to make another big studio movie and she might hire me.
Thank you. I wasn't going to be a lifetime project, so I'm really glad I asked.
Oh no, cool.
Good question. All right, what's your name?
Hey, Clint, I'm Chris.
Hey, Chris.
My question's about Apollo 13.
Okay.
First we had the book Lost World, or Lost Men, sorry.
Lost World, yeah. That's what the movie was based on that book, Jeffrey Kluger and Jim Lovell.
Yep. And then they had the screenplay, multiple drafts, and then you also had the mission control transcripts and the recordings. I was wondering, in preparation for your part, or any of the parts, do you know, did you look at those, study, or was the script pretty much the Bible?
Oh no, I mean, a Bible. First of all, it was a wonderful script that a fellow named John Sayles, a prolific independent filmmaker, he actually came in and gave the movie the final right. It wasn't even really a rewrite. John Sayles was with us while we were making the movie, and he didn't get screen credit. And he didn't care about getting screen credit. He just wanted to get the money so he could go off and do his own thing. But John Sayles was very instrumental in the movie Apollo 13. And yes, we had a lot of help from NASA. We had great technical advisors. We had Jerry Griffin. We had Jerry Bostic. We had the first man to drive on the moon. And I should know this. I've said it 1,000 times. I'll think of it in a minute. He was one of the technical advisors. We actually, for all the people that worked at Mission Control, for 2 weeks, we had like a mission control camp where we really got into the weeds about what these guys did, how they did it, what their mentality was, what their thought process was. And yes, the tape loops is what they called them. From back room to front room, the loop that had Gene Kranz. We had it all. I played a guy named Cy Liebergott. And Cy Liebergott was actually instrumental in bringing those tape loops to everybody's presence. He says, we have those. So we listened to the tape loops. And in fact, listen, Ed Harris is one of the great American actors that we've had in this last 2 centuries. He's just been dynamic. He was dynamic in Apollo 13. He was dynamic in the Jim Carrey movie.
Truman Show.
Wait, I'm sorry, again?
Truman Show.
Yeah, The Truman Show. He played Christoph, the director. And so Ed Harris is this great actor. He would listen to Gene Kranz's voice, because his tape, he had a tape, cassette tape, that had Gene Kranz barking orders and getting information from all the different stations, and just to get the pattern down. And he wasn't, I don't call this cheating, I'm just calling this having a wonderful tool. He had his little Walkman tape player, and he would listen to the way Gene Kranz would talk, and then he would put it down and he would do the shot. And I'll tell you, I've worked with some fine actors. Ed Harris is about as good as I've ever worked with. It was a wonderful experience. So yes, we used everything. And I'll tell you one thing about Apollo 13 is, and they've told me this in retrospect, Dave Scott was the first astronaut to walk on the moon, and he was one of our technical advisors. At first, when they heard that Ron Howard was making a movie called Apollo 13, they were very skeptical. Because you probably don't realize this, there was a TV movie made about Apollo 13 years before. It showed on television. It was really, I heard it was really bad. It was just cheesy and a soap opera, and it was wrong. And so the mission control people were very leery. And it wasn't until they really understood the passion that Ron had and Tom Hanks had and John Sayles had about getting it right. Because the one thing that Ron always was very strong about is this is not cowboys and Indians. These people are not. This is not Top Gun or All the Right Stuff. These were men in mission control and the men up in the capsule facing an extraordinary challenge. And in fact, Jim Lovell was the first to say they didn't do anything. The guys up in Aquarius and the Odyssey, they were just doing what mission control was telling them to do. Now they had been trained to be test pilots and they knew that this was part of the job. But that, the real heroes were those hundreds and hundreds of men. It wasn't just a handful of people at NASA. It was hundreds and hundreds of guys in Alabama and Houston, and the Cape. They were all they came down on this problem and to solve using, as it says in the movie, using computers that are small enough to fit in a room. Like Cy Liebergott told me, the computer on Aquarius, which was the lunar module, the computer on Aquarius didn't have as much memory as a pocket organizer. I mean, remember, computers were just at their very infancy. So these guys were solving problems with slide rules. Slide rules and brain power. And it's sad to say, it's not sad to say, it's a reality. It was all men back then. All men, and this is almost worse than saying all men, all cigarette-smoking men. I mean, Jesus, all the actors had to smoke all the time, and we were just hacking our lungs out. Ed Harris was, before the movie, Ed Harris was trying to quit smoking cigarettes, and that was a bad time to quit smoking cigarettes. Anyway, there's my Apollo 13 buddy. Cool.
All right, what's your name?
There.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
I'm sorry, this just makes me look like a Lemmy.
Well, just to let you know, we keep with the lights up here, I can't really see you. No, it's just you're in silhouette, so you can,
Okay.
if you want to strike an Elvis pose, I probably wouldn't see it.
All right. Anyway, my name's Debbie Beretta, and Clint, I always told myself if I ever got a chance to meet you or to speak to you, I would tell you one simple thing. You are one of the most underappreciated actors I've ever I mean it from the bottom of my heart. I've watched you since you were a kid, and I've seen you in just about everything. And somebody needs to give you a Lifetime Achievement Award. I wanted to say this in front of people because I mean it. I really do. And your work is great. And I like Apollo 13 too. My father-in-law worked on the Apollo missions. So that was great.
Well,
Y'all
thank
did a good job. They really did a good job. So,
Well,
but
thank you.
that's it. You rock. I hope somebody gives you an award for that one of these days soon.
Well, I appreciate that. Listen, I just want to keep doing it. I want to keep doing it for a while. I'm 63 years old. I'd like to work, at least another 15 years in this business. I'd like to be able to get out while I still got at least, something. But no, I appreciate it. And, one thing that I've learned, and I learned this from my mom and dad, awards and recognition is great, but what's better than that is when you keep getting hired.
Yeah, your favorite project is your next project, right?
Yes, exactly. My favorite project is my next project. And I got this movie that I did with Nick called The Old Way, and marching on with another movie that I'm in development with the fellow that originally was the director, and that's Ice Cream Man. Planning on doing a retooling, just making a completely unique movie called The Ice Cream Man with me playing a 60-year-old ice cream man.
Probably looking forward to that, but you're truly loved.
Thank you very much.
Yes? What's your name?
Hi, how's it going? My name's Todd. So your
Did
older
you
brother,
say Totten or Todd?
Kyle, actually. I don't know if that came through. Well, yeah, we can go with Todd.
That wasn't even close. What's your name, Earl?
You can call me anything, just not Shirley. But having an older brother, Ron, how much, and you starting at a very young age, how much of what he was doing, like in American Graffiti and Happy Days, influenced you to become an actor, or did it not?
Oh, well, listen, by the time he was in American Graffiti, I was 13 years old and the cloth was cut.
Yeah.
You know, when he was working on American Graffiti, I was working on a movie with Henry Fonda. You know, and listen, going back that far, okay, this will be one time to do a plug. If you guys don't know, the people that don't know, my brother and I wrote a book called The Boys, a memoir of Hollywood and family. And it's a book about Ron and I, it's a dual narrative about us growing up in show business. And I haven't really given this too much thought, but yeah, you know, I did look up to Ron. Ron was a great older brother when I was little. He always included me in wiffle ball and over the line, and you know, he'd always play with me. And being that spread, you know, when I was 5, he was 10, and you know, I'm not sure I would have been as good of an older brother as he was. You know, I don't know, I might think, yeah, you know, get away from me, little kid. But he always included me. But watching what he did as inspiration, no bearing. Because you know what, we never talked shop at home. When we got home from work, we didn't talk about how the day went. We didn't talk about lines we may have flubbed or an actor who may have been off his game. You know, we talked about the Dodgers. We talked about the Lakers. You know, we turned on the radio and listened to Vince Scully. You know, we were, and this was, Mom and Dad were really instrumental in this. You know, work was work, but then when we were done working, we just didn't talk shop. I think if anything, I fell in love with the business and I got really comfortable with it by osmosis because I saw him do it. And look, it's pretty effortless, you know? And I watched Dad do it too. Dad was an actor, you know? And he instilled in us the work ethic to do the preparatory, to work, to be able to be prepared to go in and act with anybody. And I remember as a little kid just having an inordinate amount of confidence that, you know, I could act with this guy. This guy, he was on Broadway, I could act with him. You know, and it wasn't arrogance. It was just confidence that Dad instilled. Ron and I rarely worked together. We played a lot together. We worked a couple of times on Gentlemen together. He played characters, he played one-off characters in episodes of Gentlemen. And of course, I was in the Andy Griffith Show when I was 2 years old, but I don't remember that. And then later on in life, when I was about 10 or 11, and Ron was 15 or 16, we did a Disney movie together called The Wild Country, where we played brothers. And that was a very formative summer for us. It was up in Jackson Hole, Wyoming, and I think it was the summer of the Manson murders, actually. As we went back and did the research for the book, that's, you know, and Ron, by that point, Ron was thinking about girls at 16, and, you know, I was still thinking about the Dodgers. So anyway, the you know, Ron thing, I'll tell you what I've always watched with Ron. He inherited Dad's work ethic. Ron will recognize that there's a situation that needs some brain power or problem, and he will just work it. He will work it and work it. He doesn't get anxiety. Well, he gets a little anxiety. Everybody gets a little anxiety. But he's really cool-headed about it, you know? And he's got an ego, but he keeps it in check. And just so, as an older brother in life, as an older brother, he's been a wonderful example.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Sure.
Thank you, Todd.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
yet?
What's your name, though?
I'm Henry. So my question is, what is it like to work with Adam Sandler and Jim Carrey and all them?
Well, Adam Sandler's a champ, and so is Jim. Adam Sandler, when I worked with him, he had done Happy Gilmore, you know, he'd been on Saturday Night Live, and he was known as a comedian, and he kind of known as the young buck, you know. And I didn't think he would have nearly the discipline that he has. And he, you know, he was still a relatively young man when we did Waterboy, which was the first time I worked with him. And my goodness, he, you know, he had the discipline of a man twice his age. He had the focus. You know, listen, Waterboy was directed by another fellow, Frank Karachi. But in fact, it was Adam's movie. Adam's always at the center of that world. He may have somebody directing the movie, but still, pretty much everything creatively goes through Adam. And he handles it just so beautifully. He's fun. He doesn't get bent out of shape. He's not on his cell phone. He doesn't lack focus. And he's funny. He's funny in a room. He might not think he's funny, but in a room, everybody kind of wants to gravitate to him because he's the kind of guy that, you know, you'd like him to be a relative. You'd like him to be somebody that you're just going to, you know, hang out with, you know. And he's just, I have utmost respect for him. Jim Carrey's another story. Jim Carrey is freaking brilliant. I saw Jim Carrey, the first time I met Jim Carrey, we were in a rehearsal stage at Universal Studios in August, beginning to do the rudimentary rehearsals of The Grinch. And he came in Bermuda shorts, boat shoes, and a t-shirt. And he comes in, he starts doing his mannerisms and stuff, and I'm thinking, Jesus, it's way too broad, you know. But he knew what was going to happen when he got into the costume. Because when he finally got into his Grinch getup, with 2 or 3 pounds of rubber on his face, and the wetsuit that's got hair attached to it, I mean, it's an uncomfortable situation. All of his big, broad mannerisms that he had in August, all of a sudden just were beautiful in November, you know. And it's just day in and day out. He was just doing brilliant things. And he's very inventive, but yet I wouldn't really necessarily call it improv. Because when you think about improv, you think about somebody who's doing it at the spur of the moment, you know, without a lot of rehearsal. But what he does is he thinks of stuff, and then he works it out. He thinks of stuff, and then he rehearses himself, and he practices, and I was just really impressed with him the whole time. I got to work with him in a small little role for a couple of days on a movie called Fun with Dick and Jane. About 6 months after we had done The Grinch. And you got to realize, I never saw Jim out of makeup on The Grinch. He outside of the rehearsal when we had the little rehearsal period, I saw him. But once he started being the Grinch, he was the Grinch. And I'll tell you, they put those contact lenses in his eyes, and Jesus, that's the last thing you want to be is funny. And yet he was able to turn it on and be funny. But on Fun with Dick and Jane, we actually got to sit around for a couple of days and talk. And it was just a pleasure. I would love to work with him again. And we've crossed paths a couple of times, but never had a chance to have any long conversations or have that back and forth that happens with actors. Awesome. Thank you. Yep.
All right, we got 5 minutes left, so you're our last question. What's your name?
Hi, my name is Vixen.
Vixen.
Hi, I'm from New Jersey, but I lived here in Central Florida my whole life, and you have done 2 films I know of here in Central Florida. So what memories do you have of like Central Florida, like going to the parks, or with the cast, or like any funny stories of outgoing activities or alligators, any crazy funny stories, like
maybe with a bear?
Well, listen, we did Carol Bend down in South Florida. Cool. And then we filmed the movie, in most of the movie we shot in West Palm Beach originally. And then Ivan Tors had a studio down in South Florida that we worked at for the TV series. But I've worked a bunch of times. I worked down in Homestead on a really interesting movie called Planet Ibsen. And then there's a little community called Lake Worth. That I did a really funky little movie called Hitters Anonymous. It was about a bunch of hitmen getting into recovery. It's like, I haven't killed anybody in 17 days. It's like sitting around in a group session. It's like group therapy. Funny movie. A guy named Monty Young was the director. And I think it's kind of a rare thing to find, but I worked on it with Linda Blair and Steve Dumoshel and Tom Nowicki. It was a good experience. I'll tell you what, as far as highlights, I got to work on From the Earth to the Moon, right here in Orlando. And it was, a big HBO project. Tom Hanks was the producer, Ron was one of the producers, and Tom Hanks directed an episode, and it was back in the day when, Tom couldn't do anything wrong. And literally, when it came time for him to shoot his hour-long episode, I think they shot 17 days. So they were shooting it at the speed of a movie. And I worked on it, and I was playing basically the same character I played in Apollo 13. And it was, a nice little part. And actually, I did 2 episodes. And because of scheduling, and the fact that I wasn't making that much money, I wasn't that big of a, it wasn't like they had to worry about getting me off the clock. They had me fly down for the first day of production. And then my schedule was that I ended up working the first day of production, and the 7th day of production, and then the last day of production. So I stayed at the Contemporary Hotel in Disney World for 3 weeks. And I was playing a boatload of golf at the time. And I probably played 15 rounds of golf in that trip when I was down working on From the Earth to the Moon. And I didn't have anything to do. And I walk around, one thing that I would do for exercise if I wasn't playing golf, I knew that the park would open at like 9 o'clock in the morning. And just for giggles.
What's your favorite ride?
Well, my favorite ride is, listen, I'm an Anaheim guy. My favorite ride is Matterhorn. Just, always has been. Screw the teacups. I don't like the teacups. But just being around Disney World, first of all, they're paying me. They're giving me a nice hotel room. Every night I can open my window of my hotel room and see fireworks go off. That's a pretty good thing. So, that was one of those advantages of being an actor in show business where everything worked out really well.
Thank you, man. You're a legend, mate. Thank you.
Oh, thank you very much.
We unfortunately do have to wrap this up. Is there any final thoughts you want to leave us with here this afternoon?
Oh, boy. First of all, thank you. And, both coming here at the table and this Q&A, listening to me ramble on, I appreciate it. But first of all, if your passion is storytelling, if your passion is film, don't be afraid to try. Don't be afraid to get into a collective with other people and give it a shot. Even if you guys pool together a few $1,000s and budget and make a little short film, at least you can say you've done it. You gave it an effort. Or if you're young and you have the energy, well, try to put together a friggin' film. You can edit on a laptop. You can shoot on an iPhone. But even if you're not making them, try your hand at writing. Sit down with a notebook and pencil out a few ideas, And if creating is not your thing, if all you want to do is support films, well then do it. Letter writing campaign. Listen, a letter writing campaign kept Star Trek on the map. Star Trek was about ready to get canceled if it wasn't for a letter writing campaign. And especially with the internet. Send in those comments. Send in those letters. Make your voice heard. Because I'll tell you what, you might think that your voice is going to get swallowed up. It somehow doesn't. It somehow doesn't. Your voices do get heard. I know this, my brothers had the wonderful, it was a kind of a bitter-edged thing here. double-edged sword about Solo. Because, you know, Solo took a lot of hits. And Ron experienced what, you know, internet letter writing campaigns can do. So listen, you know, I don't want to say something that I'm going to say something I don't do. I'm not a big letter writer. But just let you know that, you know, it is effective, it does work. And, you know, if you believe in something, well, send the network a letter. Or send somebody a note. You know, go on IMDb and leave a review. It all helps. And again, guys, thank you very much. I really appreciate the support.
And everyone else in the audience will come behind you on the stage.
Well,
Is that okay with you?
yeah.
We love you, Clint.
Yeah, thank you very much. No.
Okay, don't worry, guys. Meet him at his table, and he's
Come
going to
by
take
the
it.
table. I mean, listen, I'd love to talk to everybody, but to stand here and get my picture taken, you know, 200 times or something.
No, just one.
Oh, okay.